Hello and welcome to another episode of DigiPod on DawnNews English. I'm your host, Usama Khilji. And today we're diving into one of the most urgent questions shaping our digital future today. How do we build meaningful guardrails around artificial intelligence without compromising on fundamental rights, innovation, and especially freedom of expression? So these are critical questions because with the advent and increased use of artificial intelligence in almost all aspects of digital technology that we use today, we're seeing a lot of risks. And these risks need, some mitigation, and guardrails are very important. So joining us is Danielle Sharaf, who's a technologist, who's an entrepreneur, and who's also an expert on AI governance. And she recently wrote in Dawn on AI guardrails, especially in the context of Pakistan, looking at whether the current approaches to AI regulation are actually addressing the real risks. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining us, Danielle. Your article argues that current AI policies don't address the big risks that exist. So, what are the most urgent risks that you think are being overlooked right now, and especially in the context of Pakistan?
Thank you so much for having me, Osama. So just a brief, before we, dive into answering that question, I just quickly like to give you an overview of what AI governance actually means for the world and primarily for Pakistan, right? So a lot of us, when we think about AI governance, we think about regulation, more rules, more structures in place and stuff. And in Pakistan, that we all know that can be a double-edged sword, right? Um, but what that actually means is like an entire ecosystem of frameworks, of processes, of public recourse, and yes, of rules and regulation that will help AI thrive, right? Especially in economies like Pakistan, which are unlikely to develop their own frontier models. Now, coming to the risks in Pakistan, specifically when we talk about with respect to AI governance. Some of it we're already beginning to see. For instance, we're seeing like Pakistan is now one of the leading creators of AI slop in the world, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of financial crime that's happening that is now circling around and that is now being enabled by AI. A lot of fake identities, there's also like healthcare crime now that is on the rise that AI is now propagating, right? And as a country, we do not have a regulation or a public ecosystem right now to counter any of this. Like our front line of defense right now is PICA, and we all know how that's going, right? So it's very important. Like we should have started on it yesterday. We're already late in the game. AI governance is extremely important. There's a lot of talk around it. We've seen with the launch of the AI policy, which there were quite a few critics of it, and I agree that it falls short of it's a lot of fluff, it's a lot of fanciful ambition, and there's not much teeth in it. But I think it's been a good step for Pakistan. We've been one of those very few countries who've come out with an AI policy, but where it primarily falls short is on AI governance. So it definitely says that yes, there should be data sovereignty. We should have audits on AI and stuff. But how to actually do it, or what actually will be the impact of it? There's nothing like ever since we launched it in 2025, it's not happened.
Right. And you're suggesting that the existing frameworks obviously are insufficient, right? So, but where does the problem lie? Is it a lack of, regulation, like you mentioned, or is it weak enforcement, or is there a misunderstanding of AI itself? And you've also spoken about how we should have started yesterday. But at the same time, as we're seeing AI evolve so fast, so is it like are we trying to regulate it too early without understanding it? Or where does the gap lie? And very importantly, if you could also talk a bit about the trade-offs between innovation and regulation? Because, coming from the technology sector, how do you see, that balance?
So yeah, all very, very good questions. So let's take example of what's happening around the globe, right? And then let's apply them to the Pakistani ecosystem at the moment. So if we look at the three models that are going around in the world for AI governance at the moment. Number one is your EU model, right? Which is very humans first, and it's a very rights protective model, right? So yes, you innovate, but you innovate for the benefit of humankind, right? They have very strict policies for high risk sectors, auditability, compliance, anything, any AI model that enters the EU market is highly regulated that way, right? And there is an argument to be made that this is going to stifle innovation, right? But that's the choice they've made, right? The second model is the US model, which is very innovation first, right? And it is human rights much later. We will talk about like regulation much later. Let it innovate first. And we're seeing, obviously because US has hosts the largest number of frontier labs at the moment, like Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all operating out of there. NVIDIA is operating out of there for chips. So their AI governance policy or framework is very much of national security and export control, right? And then the third model is the Chinese model, which is very state aligned, right? Which means that the state comes first. So everything that's happening within the Chinese jurisdiction, they have, again, defined high risk sectors. Each sector has its own compliance. They're working a lot on data stewardship, explainable and auditable AI systems, user rights, and so on. So their strategy is very much aligned with the state. Now, where in Pakistan, where does the buck stop? Like, who is responsible, for instance, for driving, let's say, this change, or driving? Who has the baton for AI governance in Pakistan? I think it has to be a mix, right? Civil society has to keep playing its part, and I think they're doing a great job in it. For instance, you guys fighting for digital rights, data sovereignty and stuff, right? So that key has to keep happening, but this is not something that you and me, Osama, sitting in a room, having a podcast on Dawn can do. The government has to get actively involved in it. They have to mandate, they have to come up with the framework. I mean, obviously we can advise, we can help them come up with the framework, but they're the ones who will be enforcing it. Right now, there's a lack of even that framework. Nothing exists in the country. So you're importing all these models, for instance. There's a lot of open source coding that's happening in the tech sector in Pakistan at the moment. And yes, it's amazing for innovation in the country, and I'm all for it. But we're not talking about any other technology here. We're talking about AI, and AI in a lot of ways is actually, I mean, in my opinion, it's for the first time in human history, we're creating another intelligent species, right? So the rules of the game have completely changed here. What we were, for instance, going back and forth with, for instance, the social media platforms over, data sovereignty or data protection and all those rules have now, and that debate has actually amplified by 100 times, if not more, in the AI space, right? So the owners, definitely there has to be a push from the government. The businesses have to push the government, but it has to happen at a governmental end, right? This is not something that a common Pakistani, you, me, or me being like a tech founder can lead.
I'm so glad you touched upon this because, the main question also then is that who should be responsible for AI harms? So is it the developers? Is it the platforms? Is it the governments? Or is it the users that are using it to generate things? And then you also touched upon how a lot of the global models that exist, um, but when we're using them in Pakistan and we're sort of importing those models here, right? So are we also reinforcing the existing inequalities or biases that exist? And then in the end, should AI systems that are used in, say, governance or policing, should they have stricter oversight? What would that look like?
Yeah, so absolutely, you're absolutely right. And this is something that I have been talking about at length. And what I call is this can be another form of colonization for the global majority, for the global South, right? And I truly feel that we are now living in an age where data is gold and its suppliers risk being just another banana republic, especially for these AI models that are being trained on it, right? I think what we need is, look, as I mentioned earlier, despite our ambitions of, AI sovereignty, I think that's what the powers that we are calling it, that Pakistan has to be an AI sovereign country. I think we have to be realistic. It can be a moonshot, but we're not developing any foundational, any frontier models anytime soon in Pakistan, right? We will be importing these models and we will building upon them. What Pakistan needs is a regime or a framework where we can audit these systems for biases, right? So for instance, let's say that you import something that has been built in the US, an AI model, right? And you integrate it into your financial systems, right? Now, that model, it's very unlikely that that model will know the difference between qualifying a farmer sitting in Rahim Yar Khan versus qualifying a farmer sitting in Delaware, right? And that is where I feel like this algorithmic bias lies. So Pakistan
Mm,
needs to come up with a basic checklist that we're importing these models, we're implementing them at scale in our healthcare systems or in our financial systems or in our public services, right? But these are the check boxes that it should click. They should be auditable. They should be checked for bias. They should be checked for real world fit, and also the other harm that they can do, right? So right now there is no legal recourse, right? Pika falls
mm.
short of it. There's no law that exists in the country where the liability, we know where any player in this entire chain knows where the buck stops, right? If harm happens, like it's just going to be it's just going to be a case of passing the parcel right now.
So, Danielle, we're talking about guardrails for artificial intelligence. So, if you had to design, for example, three concrete AI guardrails in Pakistan, what would they be? And should guardrails be technical? Should they, built into systems, or should they be legal? You're talking about laws and penalties. And then at the same time, how do we ensure that these don't become tools for censorship, as we've seen, Pika take its shape?
Yeah, so I mean that, like I said, this is going to be very tricky, especially for a country like Pakistan, right? Where every other decision is about national security, right? So I think um, one of the top first things that we must do, and this is something that's already been initiated, is the data protection law. I feel like you guys have already been working on it extensively. More than the era of social media, I think it is now urgent and of utmost importance that we get that rolling ASAP. Right now, we are exporting our data, right? Your data, my data is being used to train these models. Yes, it is being anonymized, but it's still our data, right? And this is a fight that is being fought globally. Like I mentioned, EU is very strict on it. Brazil is very strict on it. India is already developing a regime on it, right? We haven't even started work on it. We're promising, I think what we're promising about 1 million AI professionals by 2030, but there is nobody is telling us like how, when this AI tsunami of 1 million hits you and me, who's going to protect us, or how are we going to be protected, right? So that's not happening. So number one, that has to happen, like data sovereignty. The second thing, again, that is a double-edged sword, whether you want to host it in Pakistan. I think in the age of AI, it's unlikely, it's like impossible that you can host like that data. Sure, in Pakistan, but what you can do is you can create checks and balances and contractual obligations where this data is not used for certain ways, right? So that's number one. The second, I think, which is extremely important, is all actors in this chain should understand what their responsibility is and what their
Mhm.
liability. Right now, that is very confusing. There is no liability. There's a lot of open source, again, innovation happening. I'm all for it, but it should happen with some loose guardrails, right? And number three, very, very important, is public awareness. And this is where I feel like people like you guys, people like us can, join hands and do a lot with support from the government, right? This is where the private sector can step in. Right now, people don't understand, what the actual harms of AI is, right? What deepfakes are. We are a country, unfortunately, where, a woman is killed in the name of honor regularly, right? So these are things in the age of AI, these things will only be amplified. So people need to understand and they need to know then what is it that they can do about it. So I feel like these are the three things that I would like to work on. Secondly, coming back to a previous question that you asked, whether this will stifle innovation in the country, like if there's too much regulation. So yes, we have to have a balance for sure. I think Pakistan's tech sector has a lot of potential and it has done so well when it was operating under the radar, right? With little
Mm.
regulation. But again, AI is not, I'm not seeing AI as only a technology. I feel like this is the first time in human history that we're moving towards creating something that's actually intelligent, right? So I feel like the rules of the game have completely changed.
Right. And you spoke about the risks a little bit related to, for example, women, right? Gender-related risks. We're seeing that it's becoming so easy to just use AI and pretty much, generate any sort of imagery or videos that can risk people's lives. So it's a real world risk, which is a weapon, right? So given Pakistan's history with digital misinformation, how dangerous is AI generated content for safety of vulnerable communities, but also for, say, elections or public discourse or journalism, where people can't distinguish between real and synthetic media?
Whatever, I mean, we might say we're a very tech savvy country, right? Every other
Mm,
person has a cell phone. We're a very digitally connected country, right? I don't know if you've seen some reports like Wired actually just covered this piece in India, but this is very much the reality in Pakistan as well, that there is there is a lot of AI generated YouTube content that is coming out of Pakistan, which is fake, which is AI slop, but there's a lot of monetization that's happening for these homegrown YouTubers now, influencers, right? And it's end-to-end AI. So open ChatGPT writes the script, another AI model does the voiceover, does the video, and another one does does publishing on YouTube, right? And this is end-to-end AI happening, you know, all over Pakistan right now. As far as vulnerable communities are concerned, like I said, the risks have been amplified for, in fact, this is now a global debate in the AI governance ecosystem. So we call it in the AI governance ecosystem, we call it the grand challenges. One of the grand challenge is concentration of power and overthrow of democratic processes, right? And I feel like that's very, very relevant to Pakistan, including anything from citizen surveillance, from manipulation of data to sentiment mining, to creating deep
mm,
fakes for political opposition and stuff. And right now, unfortunately, in our country, there is no legal recourse that we can take for it. Like I keep saying, PICA is ill-equipped for it, right? And you would know this better. Like So yeah, it's a growing problem. It's an urgent problem. We should have started yesterday. India has already started working on it. I gave you the example of the EU Act that we actually used primarily to draft our AI policy. But
Mm.
we lack is, again, this understanding that we are not developing any foundational models. So to replicate the EU Act into our AI policy will not hold true. Like we need to start thinking with our own brains and with our own head to come up with something that is more localized.
And based on our own contexts, right?
Exactly.
So, looking towards the future, what does a safe but innovative AI future look like for Pakistan, say in the next 5 to 10 years? And are you optimistic that policymakers will act in time, or are we heading towards a reactive, crisis-driven approach?
I think right now we're not heading towards anything. We're just like talking about a lot of again, it's a lot of fluff, it's a lot of promises, like $1 billion investment, increasing AI infrastructure, AI sovereignty. I don't even know like if we completely understand what that word means, right? I think we have to be realistic. We have to, number one, accept the fact that while our moonshot is to build like a foundation, a frontier AI model that might not come in the next like 5 to 10 years. Like just to give you an example, the US tech companies alone have pledged about $650 billion this year for AI, right? That's bigger than Pakistan's economy. So for us to be like, oh, AI sovereignty, we build our own frontier model, I don't think that's happening anytime soon, right? So let's be realistic. What we need to do is figure out what happens once these models land in our ecosystem. What happens when our homegrown technologists, our homegrown businesses, our banking systems, our healthcare systems integrate these models, right? We have to have a minimum checklist. They should be auditable. They should be checked for risk. They should be checked for bias. They should be checked for harm. These companies should know that they're going to be liable for this. I think this is something that is easily doable. And in the next 5 to 10 years, while we're preparing our workforce, another thing that we didn't, I think, I would like to mention here is job displacement, right? And this,
Mm.
I have to commend the government and also somewhat and the private sector, which is now doing a lot towards that, right? So for instance, this program of AI Seco that Telenor has launched, right? To train 100,000 freelancers. It's a fantastic program. We need to do more, right? Because yes, Pakistan has been, especially in terms of tech, we have been a tech service industry, and we will be one of the hardest hit industry countries in the world once this tsunami hits us, right? I mean, it's already there, and we will start seeing the effects of it. So these are things that we have to start working towards, right? Increase our upskilling our workforce, create like a regulatory framework. As far as data sovereignty is concerned, whether we want to post data in Pakistan or not is a contentious subject in the age of AI. I personally feel like as a technologist, it'll be very, very difficult to host that data in Pakistan, right? I mean, sure, we can, again, uh, go for it or try doing it, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we should definitely we should focus on building capability, not as a frontier market, but maybe an AI service market that we've already done for the tech sector, right? And then try and see how upskill our workers, and then also try and see how we can implement these models to the best benefit of our own people.
Mm. And Danielle, it's interesting because you started off by telling us about the three governance, AI governance models that exist. And that, you also spoke about the heavy investment that it requires. You spoke about $650 billion being invested in the US. But what we've also seen is that countries like China, for example, have been able to do a lot of this in a lot less money. The DeepSeek launch was, a whole shock to the American AI companies and the AI ecosystem that existed there. So we find Pakistan at a unique place where we have good foreign relations with the United States. A lot of our clients for tech firms are based there, but we are also on a very good terms with China and even with the European Union. Do you see that sort of good foreign relations that we enjoy translate into meaningful exchange in the tech industry and the tech sector, and especially when it comes to the AI sector? How do you think we could benefit? And what can the government and the private sector do to take advantage of these linkages we have, with all the tech powers that exist in the world?
So, first thing first, I think so Pakistan has recently acquired about I think about 3,000 H100, H200 GPUs, right? These are the NVIDIA chips that your frontier models are built on, right? But just to compare, India has roughly about 50,000 to 60,000 of these chips, right? China does not have access to them. There's an embargo. And then of course, in US, these chips go into hundreds of thousands to millions for these AI labs, right? So we do have access for sure because of our relationship with the US. Having said that, we are also the biggest market for our tech right now, for our tech exports right now, is the US market, right? That's where most of the outsourcing work comes from Pakistan, right? The other thing is that a lot of the work in Pakistan that's happening, a lot of the coding or a lot of the models that are being, AI apps that are being built on open weight, what we call in the AI space, open weight models. And these are models that once released, they cannot be recalled. They're inherently hard to govern, right? And most of these models are actually Chinese, apart from Meta, right? Most of these models like Quan, that a lot of Pakistani developers are using are Chinese models. Now, where Pakistan can actually, on a governmental level or at an exchange level, where I feel like we can actually, mint these relationships is both in terms of training for our talent, right? And then access of our talent to these frontier markets, right? So, immigration could be one thing that we can talk about. Again, there's a whole question of brain drain and all. I'm, to be honest, of the opinion, I wouldn't like to think of it as a brain drain. But yes, that. And then the second thing that Pakistan urgently needs in its tech ecosystem is investment. And that can only come through a governmental push. Yes, private equity companies can, investors are interested in a country of 200 million people who are tech enabled, mobile enabled and all. But unfortunately, getting investment in Pakistan and then repatriation of that investment of their profits from Pakistan has become so difficult that it's really, really hard for investors to see Pakistan as a stable investment partner, right? And we're seeing this as part of the in our startup ecosystem, which, by the way, we're seeing a stagnation there, or we're seeing a plateau there, precisely because this is one of the biggest reasons that investors are like, we bring money into Pakistan and then it gets stuck, we can't repatriate it. So I think these are things that Pakistan, especially in the age of AI, given that it has great historic relations with China, and now, the US is also warming up to us, we can definitely capitalize on.
So lots of opportunities other than the risks that we've discussed. And I think there's a lot to learn from what the discussion we've had with you, right? Where we're talking about risk, we're talking about guardrails, we're also talking about what legal regimes can look like. But also, very importantly, how Pakistan can leverage its relations with AI or tech powers around the world. So thank you very much for joining us, Danielle. This has been a very, very interesting discussion, and we're hoping that this debate continues and that from the private tech sector to the government in Pakistan, there are concrete steps to ensure that there are guardrails for AI, but at the same time that innovation does not stop and fundamental rights remain protected. So that's it from us. We'll be back with another episode of DigiPod on Dawn News English. This is your host, Usama Khilji, signing out.